black man named Darius Moore was wrongfully arrested by two racist police officers, Reed and Daniels. But when Darius's true identity was finally revealed, the entire police station stood frozen, stunned into silence. What happened? And who exactly is Darius Moore that made the whole department realize they were facing not just a legal case, but a reckoning of unimaginable scale waiting ahead? Let's dive into this story. But before we begin, leave me a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to follow for more. It was a sweltering morning in the heart of Atlanta. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the towering buildings, casting long shadows that stretched and danced across the uneven sidewalk. The city slowly came alive. The blaring horns of impatient drivers, the cries of street vendors hawking their goods, and the hurried footsteps of people chasing another day's survival. Among that bustling crowd, a solitary black man walked with a quiet grace. Darius Moore, 35, dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit, a neatly knotted tie and polished brown leather shoes clicking steadily against the cobblestones. His face was calm, his dark eyes cold yet composed, a man long accustomed to the judgmental stares of society. He breathed evenly, ears tuned to the melancholic jazz tune drifting from an old speaker perched above a sidewalk cafe. Darius had just finished breakfast at his regular spot, where the plump, gray-hailed white owner always greeted him with a firm handshake and a warm smile. His usual: sunny-side-up eggs, slices of turkey ham, and a plate of fresh fruit. In the distance, his gleaming black car waited silently by the curb, its polished surface reflecting the harsh sunlight. As Darius unlocked his phone, reading a message from his mother reminding him about their dinner plans set since last week, a sharp voice rang out behind him, cutting through the city's noise like a blade. "Hey buddy, hold it right there!" The gruff, commanding tone of a man who expected obedience. Darius turned slowly, his gaze steady, but a cold chill ran down his spine. He had been here before, too many times. Standing before him were two white police officers, Officer Reed and Officer Daniels. Their faces were expressionless, eyes sharp and intrusive, hands resting loosely near their holstered guns, ready for confrontation. "Let me see your ID," Reed barked. No greeting, no reason, just an order. Darius inhaled deeply, his heart beating slow but heavy. He remembered his father's words from childhood: always stay calm, always be polite, never give them a reason to escalate. "I have the right to know why you're asking, don't I?" His voice was deep, steady, polite, but with an unmistakable edge of defiance. Reed smirked. "Just a routine check. Don't make it a thing. Your ID?" The air grew heavy. Leaves rustled in the breeze, and curious eyes peeked from the cafe windows. Slowly, Darius reached for his wallet, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving the officers. "Fine," he said, his voice losing its softness. "But tell me, what law have I broken?" Daniels, silent until now, sneered, his eyes darting like a predator waiting for the kill. Reed snatched the ID, glanced at it, then delivered his next words like a knife slicing the air. "What are you doing around here? A guy like you doesn't usually belong in this part of town." Darius's jaw tightened, a flicker of rage flashing through his eyes before he suppressed it. "I just finished breakfast. I live here. Is there a problem, officer?" Reed gave a humorless laugh. "We got a report. Suspicious black male lurking around." He exchanged a glance with Daniels, then turned back to Darius, his tone dipping low and threatening. "We're gonna need to check your car." Darius stood frozen, fists clenched, palms sweating. He knew today could turn ugly. In the distance, the sharp wail of a police siren split through the morning air, the sound growing louder, closer, until it seemed to swallow the street whole. Everything blurred like a slow-motion scene in a film. Suspicious eyes, mocking smirks, the crackling police radio, the heavy thud of boots on pavement. And Darius knew this wasn't a random stop anymore. This was humiliation. A clear abuse of power by men hiding behind the badge, targeting a black man. But they had no idea. They just picked the wrong man. Because the name, Darius Moore, wasn't just some random guy in a suit. He was a federal attorney. And this story wouldn't end here. Reed's eyes narrowed, his voice like ice. "Where are you coming from?" Darius took a steady breath, forcing calm even as his heart pounded in his chest. His voice was low, polite, yet firm. "I just had breakfast at the corner diner down the street. Like I said." "What's going on, officer?" Reed squinted, lips curling into a cruel smirk. He stared at Darius as if trying to strip him bare. "We got a report about a suspicious guy in the area." He paused, then lazily tossed Darius's expensive leather wallet back. "And you fit the description perfectly." Darius felt a lump in his throat. He knew this moment was coming. The same old script he and so many black men had heard their whole lives. A well-dressed black man in an upscale neighborhood could only mean one thing: a suspect. No matter how prepared he was, the bitterness burned deep in his chest. "I understand," Darius replied, his voice still composed, steady. "There must be some misunderstanding. I'm just heading to my car to get to work." But Reed wasn't listening. He took a step forward, his presence now menacing, eyes filled with pure malice. "What do you do for a living?" he sneered. Darius swallowed his anger, lifting his chin slightly, locking eyes with Reed in silent defiance. "I'm an attorney. I have an important meeting in an hour. If there's nothing else, I'd like to be on my way." For a brief second, Reed's smug grin vanished, replaced by a flicker of surprise and then irritation, but he forced a grin, glancing at Daniels, who had remained silent like a shadow all this time. "An attorney, huh? That's cute," Daniels smirked, his voice dripping with mockery. "I hope you're not hiding anything illegal in that car of yours. Should we check, just to be sure?" The air turned suffocating. Darius could feel it, the situation spiraling out of control. One wrong move, one wrong word, and it would all go downhill. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, mixing with the chaotic symphony of the city. Car horns, hurried footsteps on concrete, and the sharp whistle of wind weaving through the red brick buildings. "There's nothing illegal in my car, officer. You're welcome to check, but I'm afraid you're wasting your time. I just want to get to work." Reed's eyes darkened, his voice low and threatening, practically growling through clenched teeth. "You don't get to decide what we do. Step away from the car." Darius froze, his fists tightening at his sides. He knew he was innocent. He knew he had every right to stand his ground, yet memories of countless stories flooded his mind. Black men pulled over, harassed, or worse, killed over nothing more than a glance at the wrong time. His father's voice echoed in his head. "Stay calm, Darius. Don't give them an excuse." Slowly, Darius raised his hands, making it clear he wasn't resisting. "All right, I'm stepping back," he rasped, his voice rough with restrained fury. No sooner had he taken a step back than Reed lunged like a wild animal. His hand clamped down on Darius's arm, twisting it painfully behind his back. Darius let out a sharp gasp, his body forced forward by the brutal grip. Before he could react, Daniels pounced, slamming him hard against the cold concrete. "What the hell are you doing?" Darius gritted out, fighting to stay calm even as pain rippled through him. "I'm not resisting. I've done nothing wrong." "You're under arrest for obstructing an officer," Reed snarled, snapping the cuffs tightly. So tight, Darius could hear the metal biting into his skin. Panic surged through. "Obstruction? I did everything you asked." But it was too late. This was no longer in his hands. Suddenly, chaos erupted. A woman screamed from a nearby balcony, her voice trembling with fury. "My God, he didn't do anything. Let him go." A young couple stopped dead in their tracks. The man whipped out his phone, recording, his voice shaking with rage. "Jesus Christ, they're arresting him for nothing." Through the corner of his eye, Darius saw the phone capturing every second. A flicker of desperate hope ignited in his chest. Maybe that video would save him. But Reed and Daniels ignored everything. They yanked Darius to his feet and shoved him hard toward the patrol car. "Move!" Reed barked, his face void of any humanity. The crowd grew louder, angrier. More people stopped, phones raised, voices thundering across the street. "Let him go! He's a damn lawyer! Do you even know what you're doing?" But Reed and Daniels didn't flinch. They shoved Darius hard into the back seat, the heavy doors slamming shut with a thunderous bang, sealing his fate like a gavel striking down a silent verdict. The patrol car pulled away, leaving behind a street drenched in outrage, furious eyes and voices echoing off the brick walls. From the back seat, Darius turned his head, staring through the glass. He watched the crowd growing at the edge of the sidewalk, faces twisted with shock, anger, and helplessness. Some clenched their fists, others kept recording, their cameras capturing every second. The air vibrated with whispers and curses swelling in the eerie silence. Darius took a deep breath, his chest aching, his heart pounding like a war drum. He knew he had to say something, anything, to make sure this moment was never forgotten. "This isn't over." His voice rang out loud and clear, slicing through the suffocating air, echoing past the thin glass and into the stunned silence. His words hung heavy, a grim prophecy suspended in the dense, electric air. Reed's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, his face paling ever so slightly. Daniels only sneered, lips curling into a cruel grin. The car rolled forward, leaving behind the seething crowd. Their furious eyes burned into the distance until the patrol car disappeared. Inside, Darius sat motionless, his hands cold, the metal cuffs biting deep into his wrists. His mind spun, racing through every worst-case scenario. What would happen next? How could he fight back? How could he make them pay for what they'd just done? Minutes later, the car slowed, pulling up to a grim, gray building. The police station. Its cold, concrete walls loomed heavy, windows barred, and the flickering fluorescent lights above cast a pale, sickly glow. It was nothing like the vibrant city street they'd left behind. Here, the air felt heavier, like every breath was a struggle, and Darius Moore knew this was just the beginning. The sound of Reed and Daniel's black leather boots slammed against the cold tiled floor, each heavy thud echoing sharply through the long narrow hallway as they dragged Darius forward. Other officers glanced over, some pausing with curious stares, others hurrying past, but every pair of eyes held that same peculiar curiosity. A well-dressed black man, immaculate in a gray suit, chin held high, eyes sharp and bright. He didn't look anything like the criminals they were used to locking up. "Name?" the officer behind the computer asked, his voice dry, disinterested. He barely glanced at Darius before returning his eyes to the screen. "Darius Moore," Reed blurted out, cutting Darius off before he could speak. The officer frowned, fingers clacking loudly on the keyboard. He squinted at the screen but said nothing, merely nodding toward the fingerprint station. "Get it done, fast," Reed muttered, shoving Darius forward. Darius took a deep breath, his hands clenched tightly. He knew resisting now was foolish. He stepped up to the station, letting them press his fingers down one by one. Each wet splat of his skin against the scanner echoed in the suffocating air. 1,000 questions swirled in Darius's mind. Why? How did it come to this? How could a man like me be reduced to this, just because of my skin? Once done, Reed and Daniels wasted no time. They grabbed Darius roughly and hauled him toward the row of holding cells at the back. The sharp clang of the heavy metal door opening sent a chill down his spine. The cell was small, grimy, peeling paint on the walls, a freezing cold steel bench, and a rusted toilet in the corner reeking of filth. "In you go, counselor," Daniel sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "Get used to it, you're going to be here a while." Darius sat down quietly, leaning back against the icy wall. His breathing was heavy, measured. He knew what they wanted, to break him, to make him snap, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. His eyes stayed sharp, his gaze unshaken, though a raging storm brewed in his chest. Reed and Daniels exchanged a glance, a smug, knowing look. To them, this was over. But somewhere deep inside Reed, an uneasy feeling clawed at him. He couldn't explain it, but something about that black man didn't fit. "Said he's a lawyer, huh?" Daniels scoffed. "They all say that." "Yeah," Reed mumbled. But his mind replayed the image of Darius, sitting there, calm, not begging, not afraid. Reed shook his head, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling creeping up his spine. Just then, as the two returned to the desk, a young officer approached, his face pale, his hands trembling as he clutched a folder. "Officer Reed, we have a problem," the young man stammered, his voice slicing through the cold air like a blade. Officer Stevens stood hesitantly, eyes darting nervously between Reed and Daniels. He was new, just a few months into the force, always trying to prove he could survive in this brutal place. But Stevens was no fool. Beneath the rookie badge was a sharp mind, far more aware than his colleagues ever gave him credit for. Swallowing hard, Stevens leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Hey, Reed, can I talk to you? Alone?" Reed scowled, irritation flashing in his eyes. What is it, kid? Stevens glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to hear. Then he leaned closer, his breath warming the collar of Reed's uniform. That guy you just brought in? Darius Moore, I think? I know who he is. Reed narrowed his eyes, his voice turning cold. What the hell are you talking about? Stevens swallowed again, heart hammering in his chest, then spoke even softer, voice trembling. I saw him in the papers a few weeks ago. He's not just some nobody, Reed. Darius Moore? He's a famous civil rights attorney, the real deal. He's worked big cases, the kind that take down entire systems, Reed. Reed's eyes twitched, a flicker of confusion quickly masked with a forced smirk. You sure? Positive, 100%. I didn't realize at first, but when I heard the name, it hit me. Reed, if that's really him, this could blow up in our faces. Stephen's voice shrank with every word, as if afraid the walls might hear. The air thickened like molasses. Reed's throat went dry, a strange unease tightening around his chest, but he pushed it down, waving Stevens off like a pesky fly. I'll handle it. You worry about your own shit, Reed snapped. But as he turned away, Reed couldn't help glancing back toward the holding cell, toward the black man they'd just locked up. That gnawing feeling clawed at him again, sinking its sharp talons deep into his gut. Stevens stood frozen, lips pressed tight, then bit down hard as he pulled out his phone. His heart pounded like a drum as his trembling fingers searched for a familiar number. One deep breath, and then he hit call. The phone rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. Hello? Captain, it's Stevens, the young officer stammered. Sir, we've got a situation here. I think you need to know about it. Inside the cold, damp holding cell, Darius Moore sat silently, his back resting against the chilly brick wall. His eyes stared straight ahead, lips pressed tightly together. No one could see the storm raging inside his mind. He knew. This wasn't some random arrest. They were targeting him. But why? That part he didn't know yet. Darius inhaled deeply, forcing down the creeping fear gnawing at his chest. He had stood in courtrooms against forces far more powerful than these two, and he wasn't going to break here. An hour dragged by, slow and suffocating. Only the ticking of a wall clock filled the empty air. Tick, 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 until finally the cell door creaked open, the rusty hinges shrieking through the hollow hallway. A woman stepped inside. Slim build, hair pulled tightly back, her sharp eyes gleaming like the edge of a blade. The station seemed to fall silent as her presence filled the room. This was Lieutenant Kate Thompson, newly transferred from another precinct, but her reputation had already arrived long before her. Tough, unyielding, and utterly allergic to injustice. The crisp click-click of her black leather shoes echoed with authority against the cold tile floor. Her steely gray eyes scanned the room until they landed squarely on Reed and Daniels, who were whispering nervously in the corner. Reed, Daniels! Her voice cracked like a whip, making both men flinch. What the hell is going on here? Reed turned stiffly, forcing a thin smile. Nothing serious, Lieutenant. Just another day at work. Thompson's eyes narrowed, cold and cutting. Really? I heard you brought someone in this morning. Name's Darius Moore. Reed hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. That's correct. Charges? Thompson asked, her tone calm but laced with deadly intent. Obstruction of justice, Reed muttered, avoiding her gaze. Is that so? Thompson's eyes bored into him, like she could peel back every lie. She let the silence stretch, then spoke, slow, deliberate, each word sharp as a blade. Take me to him. Now. Trapped, Reed swallowed hard, casting a nervous glance at Daniels. Both men looked like cornered animals. But the order had been given. There was no room left to maneuver. The air grew heavy, the station sinking into an uneasy stillness. The real storm had just begun. This way, Lieutenant, Reed croaked, trying to steady his voice, but the tension bled through every word. Lieutenant Kate Thompson followed, her stride long and unwavering. The steady clack of her heels struck the cold gray tiles, slicing through the heavy air. The stench of mildew, old paint, and sweat clung to the walls, making her frown in distaste. The deeper they walked into the cell block, the stronger her gut screamed. Something wasn't right here. They stopped in front of the last cell. Thompson's sharp gaze cut through the dim light, falling on the man inside. A black man in a charcoal gray suit, seated calmly on a freezing metal bench. His hands rested lightly on his knees, posture upright, his expression unnervingly composed. No fear, no desperation. Something about him made Thompson's breath catch. This was no criminal. "That him?" she asked coldly, eyes locked on Darius. "Yes, Lieutenant, that's him," Reed nodded stiffly. "As I said, obstruction of justice. We had no choice but to bring him in." Thompson didn't reply. Instead, she reached for the cell door, the hinges screaming as she pulled it open. The shrill creak echoed down the hall, turning heads. She stepped in, tall, commanding, stopping directly in front of Darius Moore. Darius lifted his head slowly, his calm eyes meeting hers. No fear, no rage, just the quiet strength of a man who knew exactly where he stood and why. It was unnerving. "Mr. Moore," Thompson began, her voice firm but even, laced with authority. "I'm Lieutenant Kate Thompson. I have a few questions for you." Darius gave a slow nod, his deep, steady voice rising through the suffocating air. "Of course, Lieutenant. I'm more than willing to cooperate." Thompson blinked, caught off guard for a moment by his composure. She gave a subtle nod, adjusting her stance. "According to the report, you were arrested for obstruction. I'd like to hear exactly what happened, from you." Darius held his gaze steady, unwavering. "Lieutenant, I complied fully with Officers Reed and Daniels' instructions. I had just approached my car when they stopped me. When I asked why I was being detained, things escalated. Before I could understand what was happening, I was handcuffed and accused of obstruction." His voice was firm, calm, each word clear and deliberate, echoing with quiet dignity. Lieutenant Thompson listened intently, her eyes narrowing, her face hardening as the sheer absurdity of what she was hearing settled in. Slowly she turned, her voice sharp as a blade. "Reed, is what Mr. Moore just said true? Did he disobey your orders at any point?" Reed swallowed hard, his fingers tightening into fists as he stammered. He questioned us, asked why we stopped him. Things got tense. We had reason to suspect he was hiding something." "Reason?" Thompson's voice was cold as steel. "What reason, Reed?" Reed choked, eyes dropping to the floor. "Just a gut feeling, Lieutenant. A gut feeling?" "A gut feeling?" Thompson nearly growled, each word biting. "That's your justification for handcuffing a citizen?" Before Reed could stammer a reply, the cell door burst open with a loud bang. Officer Stevens rushed in, his breathing uneven, eyes darting anxiously before locking onto Thompson. "Lieutenant, I need to speak with you. Privately." Stevens lowered his voice, avoiding Reed and Daniels' burning stares. Thompson scowled, shooting a cold glare at Reed, a silent warning, before she slammed the cell door shut. "Speak, Stevens." Stevens leaned in, his voice a low whisper, barely audible. I double-checked, ma'am. The man we arrested, Darius Moore, he's not just anybody. He's a high-profile civil rights attorney, the kind who's taken down police departments, exposed corruption, the type you read about in the headlines. Thompson's chest tightened, a cold shiver crawling down her spine. She had suspected, but hearing it confirmed sent a surge of dread through her veins. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice low, dangerously calm. "Positive, Lieutenant." Stevens nodded, hands trembling as he held out his phone. On the screen, a news article flashed. Darius Moore's face next to headlines of massive court victories. "Lawsuits against government agencies and law enforcement. If this gets out, we're not just looking at internal affairs," Stevens whispered. "The media, the courts, it'll be a damn storm." Thompson's eyes scanned the article. Case after case, each one a devastating blow to institutions of power. Her face paled. Slowly, she looked up, glaring at Reed and Daniels, who stood frozen nearby, their faces drained of all color. There was no doubt now. Thompson knew she had to act fast. This was no longer a simple arrest. One wrong move, and the entire station could crumble. "Reed, Daniels!" Lieutenant Kate Thompson's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, slicing through the tension as she stormed toward the two officers standing awkwardly by the holding cell. "With me, now!" The two men exchanged panicked glances before silently trailing behind her, their footsteps pounding heavily against the cold, grimy tiles. The sound echoed ominously through the dim corridor. Once they reached a secluded corner, far from prying ears, Thompson whirled around, eyes blazing with fury. "Do you two even realize who you just arrested?" Her voice was low, but every word hissed like a blade drawn from its sheath. Reed stammered, face pale and slick with sweat. "Lieutenant, he didn't say who he was, just some suspect. Shut up!" Thompson snapped, her glare sharp enough to slice him in half. "That man you dragged in is Darius Moore, a civil rights attorney, the kind that topples police scandals. If he files charges, this whole department is done. You think this little stunt ends here?" Daniels swallowed hard, his lips trembling. "Ma'am, we didn't know." "Didn't know?" Thompson's voice roared down the empty hallway. "Do you idiots even check who you're arresting?" At that moment, a commotion erupted outside. Angry shouts, voices rising in fury. Thompson's head snapped toward the window and her face went pale. The sounds of protest grew louder. Chants, screams, people demanding answers. The real storm had arrived. "How are we going to handle this, Lieutenant?" Stevens lowered his voice, standing close beside Lieutenant Kate Thompson, his eyes fixed anxiously on the furious crowd roaring outside. Thompson clenched her fists, her gaze locked on the glass window. Beyond it, a sea of people surged like a tidal wave, their banners raised high, "Justice for Darius Moore," emblazoned in blazing red, threatening to swallow the entire station whole. The chants thundered through the air, crashing against the cold gray walls of the police station like relentless waves. She took a deep breath, her voice raspy but unwavering. "We'll treat this as a misunderstanding. Issue a statement that after reviewing all the evidence, we've determined there is no legal basis for his arrest. Releasing Mr. Moore is the right decision, in the name of justice and fairness." It wasn't perfect. Thompson knew that. But right now, it was the only way to cool the boiling rage outside. The only move that might prevent this situation from exploding beyond their control. Tearing her gaze away from the window, Thompson turned sharply, striding down the long, dim hallway. The flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast a ghostly glow, deepening the suffocating air around them. Her heels echoed sharply, click, clack, click, mingling with the frantic clack of keyboards as Reed and Daniels typed their reports, beads of sweat glistening on their foreheads. Thompson stopped cold, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "When this is over, we're going to have a conversation, and I guarantee it won't be pleasant." Reed swallowed hard, his shoulders hunching as he gave a stiff, robotic nod. He knew the real storm was still coming. Wasting no time, Thompson spun on her heel and marched straight toward the holding cell. The heavy iron door screeched in protest as she pulled it open herself, the metallic screech echoing down the corridor. Inside, Darius Moore sat on the cold metal bench, calm and composed, yet his sharp, steel-like gaze locked onto her, unyielding, unforgiving. "Mr. Moore?" Thompson's voice softened, though she fought to steady her breath. "I've reviewed everything. It's clear this was a misunderstanding. You're free to go." Outside, the crowd had swelled, a sea of faces, banners, and burning eyes. "Justice for Darius Moore!" The chant roared like a war cry, a line drawn in the sand. But inside that small-town police station, power shifted, and everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. Inside the small-town police station, the air remained heavy, thick like the sky before a violent storm. Every officer moved with leaden steps, their eyes downcast, their voices caught in their throats, as if one wrong word could shatter the fragile silence hanging in the air. Outside, the angry crowd had begun to disperse, but everyone knew the damage was done. This incident, this name, would not fade away like so many others. Lieutenant Kate Thompson leaned back in her chair, her vacant eyes fixed on the cold, cracked ceiling. The room was so silent she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Yet inside her mind, a storm raged. Darius Moore. His name rang through her thoughts like a relentless warning bell. That man, he wasn't just the lawyer Reed and Daniels' flimsy report described. There was something far bigger, far more dangerous lurking behind those calm, razor-sharp eyes of his. Without hesitation, Thompson shot upright. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of the old department laptop, the screen casting a ghostly blue glow across her pale face. She typed his name, Darius Moore, into the search bar. One by one, headlines burst onto the screen, flashing like blades slashing across her vision. Civil rights attorney Darius Moore wins, landmark police brutality case. Darius Moore, public enemy #1 for racist police departments. Moore leads federal lawsuit on systemic racism in law enforcement. Each headline hit Thompson like a gut punch, forcing the air from her lungs. Her eyes locked onto a particular article, the most recent case Darius had won. A major police department in the neighboring state, dismantled by him. Dozens of officers fired, some even indicted on federal charges. Darius Moore wasn't just a lawyer. He was a nightmare, the very storm that could tear a system apart. And then, the thing Thompson feared most appeared before her eyes. A federal news bulletin. Bold, cold, and final. Darius Moore confirmed as a key witness in the federal investigation into systemic racism within U.S. police forces. Thompson's breath caught. Her heart pounded like a drum. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, scrolling quickly to a familiar number. An old contact at the FBI, someone she trusted to tell her the truth without igniting the entire powder keg. The call was short, the voice on the other end cold, detached, like delivering a death sentence. Yes, Kate, it's true. Darius Moore is working for the feds. His mission is to gather evidence on police departments involved in racial discrimination. And your town, your department. You're on the list. A chill shot down Thompson's spine, her throat tightening as if a noose had just been pulled taut. The ground beneath her felt like it was crumbling. They hadn't just arrested a man, they had declared war on the very system meant to protect them. And now, the reckoning was coming. Reed's voice tried to sound steady, but the tremble in his tone betrayed the growing fear choking his chest. Lieutenant Kate Thompson, her voice dropped low, cold, sharp as a blade slicing through the suffocating air of the room. I know exactly who Darius Moore is. Reed's eyes flew wide open. Daniel stiffened, his face drained of all color. Neither dared speak, but Thompson saw it, that flicker of panic flashing across their faces. The kind of fear when you realize you've stepped on a landmine and it's already too late. Do you two even understand what you've just done? Thompson's voice was low, each word hitting like a hammer, slow, deliberate, deadly. Darius Moore is no random black man wandering the streets. He is a civil rights attorney, a federal witness working undercover, gathering evidence on corruption within law enforcement, and, she paused, her eyes like daggers, everything he needs to destroy this department. You two just handed him on a silver platter. Reed turned ghostly pale, his lips trembling as he stammered. Lieutenant, we didn't know. He never said he was with the feds. Didn't know? Thompson's voice cut him off like a whip as she stepped closer, her face inches from his. And because you didn't know, you thought he was just another black guy lost on your streets, easy prey? Drag him in, rough him up, teach him a lesson, huh? Daniels flinched, his head dropping low, sweat breaking out across his forehead. He'd opened his mouth to argue, but one glance at Thompson's frozen stare shut him down. Thompson drew a deep breath, her chest rising with the effort to suppress the fury boiling inside. You two just threw this entire department, this whole damn town, into the lion's den. Do you understand that? If this federal investigation blows open, we're not just losing our jobs. We'll be lucky if we're not counting days in a prison cell. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Daniels looked ready to puke, his face green and slick with sweat. Reed's body shook, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Finally, his voice broke. What do we do now, Lieutenant? Before Thompson could speak, the conference room door burst open with a violent slam. Captain Frank Daniels stormed in like a thunderstorm unleashed. Face flushed crimson, eyes burning with rage. He scanned the room, nostrils flaring, his voice erupting like a crack of thunder. "Thompson!" he roared. You tell me right now what the hell is going on here. The sound echoed off the cold gray walls, a death knell ringing in the hearts of everyone present. The storm had truly arrived. Daniels? Lieutenant Thompson? The voice of Agent Mark Williams sliced through the air, cold and precise as he stepped into the conference room. His sharp eyes swept across every face, his presence heavier than the air itself. We need to talk. Now. Chief Frank Daniels stiffened, squaring his shoulders, struggling to hold his ground even as dread twisted in his gut. Agent Williams. I'm sure there's an explanation. Williams raised a gloved hand, cutting him off, his voice like cold steel. No need, Chief. I'm fully briefed on the situation, and let me be clear. He paused, each word dropping like a hammer. This is extremely serious. Thompson felt her chest tighten, heart pounding so loud it roared in her ears. One look at Williams, the way he stood, composed like a judge delivering a verdict, told her they had officially lost control. Darius Moore is a key player in a federal investigation, Williams continued, his tone low, but every word slamming into the room like a blow. This operation has been running for months. Your officer's arrest this morning, he shook a sharp glare at Reed and Jenkins, who looked ready to collapse, was a colossal mistake, one that could spark a disaster if mishandled. The air in the room turned suffocating. No one dared breathe. Only the shaky, shallow gasps of Reed and Jenkins echoed faintly. Daniels swallowed hard, gripping the armrest until his knuckles turned white. We understand, Agent Williams, and we're ready to cooperate fully. Williams gave a slight nod, but his gaze remained ice-cold. Good, because your cooperation is the only thing keeping this powder keg from exploding right now. Thompson clenched her fists, mind racing. This was no longer about Darius Moore. This was the future of their entire department, their careers, their lives, hanging by a thread. Williams took a slow, deliberate step forward, lowering his voice though the weight of his words crashed down on them like a tidal wave. You will issue a formal apology to Darius Moore, on behalf of the entire department. He turned, locking eyes with Chief Daniels. And let me make this perfectly clear. Any sign of resistance, any attempt to cover this up, will be met with immediate federal action. Daniel's face flushed crimson, rage burning beneath his skin, but even he knew better than to defy the man standing before him. Gritting his teeth, he forced out a stiff nod. Understood. The room fell silent, the sound of the storm brewing outside forgotten, because in that moment every soul inside understood one thing. The nightmare had just begun. Williams turned to Lieutenant Thompson, his voice cold as ice. Lieutenant, I'm assigning you to oversee this personally. You're responsible. There can be no more mistakes. Thompson's throat went dry. She swallowed hard, forcing a slow nod. Understood. I'll make sure of it, personally. Without another word, Williams turned and walked toward the door. But just before stepping out, he paused, his voice dropping low, each word slicing the air like a blade. One more thing. Consider this your final warning. The federal government is watching closely. Any further misconduct from this department, and there won't be a second chance. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. A suffocating silence fell. Beads of sweat formed on Thompson's temple as she swallowed hard, feeling the crushing weight of the entire building on her chest. Outside, the air around the station grew heavier by the second. Everyone inside knew the storm was far from over. News of the wrongful arrest had spread like wildfire, erupting into a wave of outrage consuming the city. Hundreds of protesters crowded the front of the station, banners raised high, voices thundered through the streets. Justice for Darius Moore. End racist policing. Inside his office, Chief Frank Daniels sat hunched behind his desk, hands trembling as he picked up the phone to the media division. His voice cracked. Draft me a public apology, now. We're holding a press conference this afternoon. Prepare everything. The reply came shaky, fearful. Understood, Chief. Daniels dropped the phone, leaning back and staring blankly at the ceiling, his eyes empty, hollow. He knew. No amount of apology would erase the stain of what had happened today. Outside, the crowd roared with fury. Cameras zoomed in from every angle, each lens cutting through the department's pride like a knife. The battle had begun, and Frank Daniels felt it deep in his bones. He was standing at the edge of a cliff, one gust away from plummeting into the abyss. The weight of every decision, every cover-up he'd allowed over the years crushed his shoulders. He'd turned a blind eye for too long, let Reed and Jenkins push too far, all in the name of keeping the peace in this small town. Now, that peace was crumbling, and the ghosts of his choices were here to collect. A sharp knock shattered the silence. "Come in!" Daniels rasped. Lieutenant Kate Thompson entered, her face tense but her eyes steady, burning with purpose. "Chief, Darius Moore is outside, with the crowd." Daniels nodded, forcing himself to stand, though his legs felt weighed down with stone. "Good. I'll face him, and I'll apologize." Thompson hesitated, then stepped closer, her voice dropping low, grave. "Before you go out there, there's something you need to know." Daniels frowned, his stomach sinking. "What is it, Thompson?" She drew a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "I've found evidence of systemic corruption in this department. Bribery, falsified reports, racial profiling. It's not just Reed or Jenkins, it runs deep. Years of cover-ups hidden away." Daniels went cold, a chill running down his spine. Are you certain?" Thompson nodded slowly. "I've started gathering evidence. Darius and the federal inspectors, they're helping, but cleaning this up, it's going to be long and brutal." Daniels exhaled sharply, his shoulders sagging under the weight of it all. "Then we do it. It's time we face this." Thompson nodded once, her voice firm, unwavering. "I'm with you out there, Chief. We need to show the community we're serious about change, about survival." Daniels didn't answer, but his eyes said it all. This was no longer about saving face. This was survival. Either they act now, or the department collapses. Together they walked out of the office. The hallway echoed with the heavy thud of their footsteps, like marching toward judgment. As they neared the front doors, the crowd's roar crashed into them like violent waves. "Justice for Darius Moore! Shut down the corrupt police!" Daniel swallowed hard, his gut twisting, but his face held a calm mask. He pushed open the heavy wooden doors, sunlight flooding in, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating every hidden sin of the department. And there, in that searing light, Chief Frank Daniels finally understood. There was no turning back. The crowd fell silent. Camera shutters clicked furiously, microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting over one another. But Chief Frank Daniels didn't look at any of them. His eyes locked onto the podium in the center of the courtyard, where Darius Moore stood tall, steady as a monument to justice itself. Darius's gaze held Daniels. No rage, no hatred, just the unwavering stare of a man ready to claim the truth. Daniels tightened his grip on the microphone, his voice strained but loud enough to cut through the thick air. "Good afternoon." He cleared his throat, adjusting the mic, his voice dropping low, weighed down by years of unspoken guilt. "I want to begin by admitting that the arrest of Mr. Darius Moore this morning was a mistake. A mistake that should never have happened." Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. Daniels could feel it, the crushing weight of decades of empty promises, of secrets buried deep beneath a thin layer of order. "I take full responsibility, and on behalf of this police department, I offer my deepest apologies to Mr. Moore and to this entire community." The crowd rumbled, skeptical, angry, tired. Daniel swallowed hard, gripping the mic as though it were a lifeline. His voice lowered like a man confessing in court. "We know. This is not an isolated incident. It is merely the tip of an iceberg. A rot that has festered within this department for far too long." He paused, turning his eyes toward Darius, voice trembling. "Effective immediately, Officers Reed and Jenkins are suspended. Pending internal investigation, we will review every process, every case, and cooperate fully with the federal inspectors to ensure this department is held accountable and changes." The wind picked up, rustling the flags overhead, the only sound in the uneasy silence that followed. Daniels looked out across the sea of faces, tired, skeptical, beaten down, but he knew this was their last chance to save what was left. I know words are not enough, Daniels added, his voice cracking. But I promise you, with everything I have left, we will change. We will listen. We will work with this community and with people like Mr. Moore to rebuild from these ashes. No one clapped. No cheers. Only Darius Moore, standing firm, nodding slowly, acknowledging the apology, and making it clear. I'll be watching every step you take. And Daniels knew the real battle had only just begun. Daniels's voice trembled as he forced out the final words. A police department that serves and protects everyone, regardless of race or background. He faltered, struggling for a way to end it. But before he could speak again, Darius Moore stepped toward the podium. The golden light of the setting sun washed over his calm face. His voice, deep and steady, carried through the courtyard. Chief Daniels. He raised a hand, signaling him to step aside. I appreciate your apology, but this isn't just about words. True justice doesn't end with a press conference or apologies. It demands action. It demands change, accountability, and a real commitment. Daniels swallowed hard and quietly stepped back, knowing Darius was right. This was only the beginning. Darius turned, facing the silent crowd, his gaze sweeping across every weary face that had waited so long for this moment. His voice rang out, strong, resolute, shattering the heavy air. We've heard apologies like this too many times, but what we need now is a promise, a real commitment to lasting change. Murmurs swelled. The wind whistled through the flags above, but no one interrupted. Darius continued, his voice growing stronger. We must hold those in power accountable, and we, all of us here today, must stand together to build a system of true justice, where every person is treated with dignity and respect. Thunderous applause erupted, booming like a storm. Chants of "Justice, justice" pierced the sky, mingling with tears and the dawning light of hope on worn faces. Darius scanned the crowd, his eyes burning with quiet determination and belief. This isn't just about me. It's not just about today. It's about all of us. About every person this system has ever crushed. Every family that's ever lost someone to injustice. And making damn sure no one else has to suffer what I did. He paused, taking a long, steady breath. The wind lifted his words, carrying them over the gathered crowd. I know change won't come overnight. His voice softened, yet remained unshakable. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes all of us standing together. But I believe we can do it. We will build a better future, not just for ourselves, but for our children and every generation that follows. The final roar of applause rose like a tidal wave, drowning out the fading sun. For the first time in a long time, hope returned to that small western town. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, rolling out like crashing waves across the square. Shouts of triumph and hope followed, their rhythm pulsing through the air, a symphony of belief and newfound purpose. Darius Moore quietly stepped down from the podium, his head held high as he walked into the courtyard. Friends and allies rushed forward, wrapping him in tight embraces. Their eyes shone with pride, tears streaming down their faces, as if washing away years of silence and pain. From the steps above, Lieutenant Kate Thompson stood watching, a complex wave of emotions rising in her chest. Relief, determination, and for the first time, hope. This is only the beginning, she whispered. Thompson turned toward Chief Frank Daniels, who remained frozen, his eyes distant. Slowly he gave a nod, his voice rough and hollow. There's still a lot of work ahead of us. And we'll do it, Chief, Thompson replied firmly, her gaze never leaving Darius. As the crowd gradually thinned, Thompson's attention was drawn to a solitary figure standing quietly on the outskirts. A tall man, dressed in a sharp black suit, his expression unreadable, radiating power. His cold eyes were locked onto Darius, staring with a depth that sent a chill down her spine. Thompson approached cautiously, her voice steady. Can I help you? The man turned, his gaze slicing through her like a knife. A thin, humorless smile tugged at his lips, never reaching his eyes. I'm here to see Darius Moore. I have an important message for him. Thompson's fists clenched instinctively, a sense of danger rising within her. And who are you? The man let out a quiet scoff. Just someone with a vested interest in justice. Before Thompson could question him further, he turned and melted into the dispersing crowd. A cold gust swept through the square, wrapping around Thompson like unseen fingers, pulling a shudder from deep within. She stood there, staring after the man until he was gone. Deep down, she knew, today was merely the prologue. The real battle was still ahead. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the steps of the police station. The sky blazed red, a crimson warning of the storm yet to come. The fight for justice was far from over, and the road ahead promised only harder battles. Yet, for the first time in years, Lieutenant Kate Thompson felt a flicker of hope. Fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally standing at the edge of real change. Miles away, inside a small community center, another meeting was underway, one that would chart the city's future. Darius Moore sat at a worn wooden table, surrounded by faces representing every corner of the community. Local leaders, social activists, lawyers, teachers, and everyday citizens driven by a shared hunger for justice. The room buzzed with heated debate, voices rising, echoing off peeling walls. "We have to start with education," Maria Hernandez, a local high school teacher, declared passionately. "If we want lasting change, it has to begin with the youth." "I agree." Dr. James Carter, a sociology professor, nodded, his eyes grave. "But we can't forget the people suffering right now. They need help. Immediate help." Darius listened intently, jotting down notes, interjecting only to clarify or push deeper. The air vibrated with energy, like a storm gathering strength. This was exactly what he'd dreamed of. A movement built from collective power, not from one lone voice. After hours of debate, a clear plan began to take shape. A free legal aid office, to give a voice to those unable to afford an attorney. An independent oversight board, working with the police internal affairs unit to ensure every misconduct is exposed. Education programs, teaching civil rights, law, and conflict resolution in schools and community centers. By the meeting's end, exhaustion weighed heavy, but in every eye gleamed a stubborn light of hope. The road ahead was long, but together they had taken the first step. In the months that followed, the city began to change. Under Lieutenant Thompson's sharp watch, and with the oversight board's relentless push, the police department reformed its training. Young officers like Stevens, who truly wanted to rebuild trust, were given a chance to learn, grow, and work hand in hand with local leaders and social workers. The fight was far from over. But for the first time, the town, once drowning in silence, began to find its voice, and with it, a future worth fighting for. The Community Justice Initiative was now fully operational. The Legal Aid Office had already taken on dozens of wrongful arrest cases, restoring the dignity of those once silenced by injustice. Pilot education programs rolled out in several schools, with plans to expand citywide. But change was never easy. Incidents of abuse still surfaced, tensions simmered beneath the surface, and resistance remained. Yet now there was a system in place, a watchful eye ready to hold power accountable. Voices once silenced were now rising, ready to defend justice. 6 months after that fateful arrest, Darius Moore walked through the doors of the police station once more, but this time he wasn't a suspect. He wasn't a victim. Today, he was a partner. A group of police cadets sat upright in the training room, flipping through manuals, preparing for a special session. Darius had been invited to speak. Lieutenant Kate Thompson waited at the door, her eyes reflecting something new, genuine respect. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Moore," she said, extending her hand. "I believe our rookies will learn a lot from you." Darius shook her hand, feeling the sincerity in her grip. He nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. "I'm not here to talk about the past," his voice calm but firm. "I'm here so you understand one thing. That badge you wear, it's not power, it's responsibility." The rookies fell silent, eyes locked on him. A new chapter was opening, not just for them, but for this entire town. "It's good to be here," Darius said softly, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Just call me Darius." The old training room door creaked open, echoing through the still air. Darius stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over rows of young, uncertain faces. Cadets sat up straight, their eyes wary, curious, some even guarded. Darius understood. To them, he was the embodiment of an uncomfortable truth, a challenge to the old ways they'd been taught. But beyond the hesitation, Darius saw something else. Hope. A new generation, still young enough to change everything. Drawing a deep breath, Darius let his voice carry, low and steady, filling the silent room. Good morning. I'm Darius Moore. Today, I'm here to talk to you about justice. But not the kind written in law books or stamped on your badges. I'm talking about true justice. The kind that begins with how you treat every single person out there, with respect and with humanity. The room held its breath. The faint scratch of pens, the soft hum of the air conditioner, every sound seemed to fade, giving space to Darius's words. He shared his own story, the pain, the injustice, but also the strength it forged, and the unshaken belief that change was possible. Eyes followed him, questions came, thoughtful, genuine, not defensive. Debates sparked, but they were respectful. No sneers, no dismissive laughs. And Darius felt it. The first stirrings of a generation willing to think, willing to listen, willing to stand for what's right. When the session ended, Darius packed his notes, heart lightened by the hope he'd helped spark. A young woman approached, her face still fresh, but her eyes ablaze with determination. Mr. Moore, I just wanted to thank you. I joined this force to help people, to make a difference, but after everything, I started doubting if I could. Hearing you today reminded me why I'm here. Darius smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. What's your name? Sarah? Sarah Johnson? Sarah, I'm glad you're here. The force needs people like you, people who dare to question, to learn, to stand up for what's right. Never lose that, all right? Sarah nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Darius watched her walk away, hope swelling in his chest. He knew it was young officers like Sarah who would decide if justice could truly survive. That night, Darius returned to his Community Justice Initiative office. Piles of case files waited for him, the names and faces of people crushed by a system meant to protect them. The wind howled against the windows, his desk lamp cast a warm golden glow over his thoughtful face. Each page he turned carried a story, a pain, a plea. But for Darius, every word was fuel, every case a reminder of why he fought and why he would never stop. A sharp knock echoed through the quiet room, breaking the stillness. Darius looked up and met the bright, excited gaze of Maria Hernandez, the high school teacher who had stood by him from the very beginning. Her face lit up, unable to hide her joy. Darius, I just came from the school board meeting. They approved the entire civic rights curriculum for every school in the district. Darius shot to his feet, a radiant smile spreading across his face. That's incredible news, Maria. You did it. Maria shook her head gently, her voice softening. No, we did it, Darius. But honestly, if it weren't for you, if it weren't for everything you were willing to face, this never would have happened. Darius looked at her, his voice trembling just slightly. I was just the spark, Maria. But this movement, it's bigger than me, bigger than all of us. It belongs to the entire community. They sat together, mapping out the next steps to roll out the program. As they worked, Darius felt a profound sense of fulfillment rising within him. This was real change. Not fiery speeches on courthouse steps, but concrete actions shaping the future. Later that night, Darius stepped out of the Community Justice Initiative office. The streets were quiet, the soft chirping of crickets filling the night air. The wind whispered through the narrow alleys of the small western town. He paused, glancing up at the vast night sky, a canvas of endless stars glittering above him like tiny beacons of hope. We're on the right path, Darius whispered to himself. Deep down, he knew the fight was far from over. The road ahead would be long, filled with obstacles, but as long as they kept walking forward, never stopping, they would build a community where justice wasn't just a word, but the very air every person breathed. With that quiet resolve, Darius moved forward, ready to face tomorrow, ready for the new challenges and the new chances to change the world. The story of Darius Moore serves as a profound reminder for all of us, especially those who have lived through life's many ups and downs. Justice doesn't come naturally, it is built every day through courage, persistence, and small but consistent actions. In today's society, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of injustice, to believe that one person cannot make a difference, but Darius proved otherwise. One man brave enough to stand up and confront a broken system can open a new path for an entire community. The most important lesson here is, no matter your age or who you are, your voice holds power. Always teach your children and grandchildren to cherish justice, to speak the truth, and to never compromise with what is wrong, because that will be the greatest legacy we leave for the generations to come. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to follow my channel. I've poured my heart and countless hours into crafting emotional, powerful stories like this, and your support truly means the world to me. Thank you for joining me on this journey.